Let's talk about some news from Nvidia and Nokia.
Why this one with Nokia, this announcement with Nokia at GTC? The short answer is we thought there's all these questions about when is AI going to begin expanding outside of the data center and start entering more of the real world. And it's happening. These things take time. I think everybody wants like a very quick jump from data center AI directly to enterprise software, or a quick jump to robotics or self-driving cars or whatever. But it does take time. And this is an example of how AI is beginning to spread beyond just the centralized data center location. Quick look at the portion of the supply chain that we're discussing today.
Nvidia primarily in fabless chip design, as well as plenty of intellectual property and patents on all kinds of stuff at this point. And then Nokia primarily fits into the tech equipment and devices segment.
Yeah, although they also participate in IP as well. Casey's going to show you the Nokia company specific supply chain later on, but Nokia, of course, inherited Bell Labs, AT&T's old R&D segment when they acquired Lucent a number of years ago. So they also do IP and constant R&D into new things, like, for example, 6G communications, which is what we're going to talk about here in just a moment.
Let's take a look at Nokia's supply chain.
If you click on the little pluses in the company supply chain, oftentimes you're going to get like an expanded explanation of what you're looking at. So for example, on the upstream dependencies, the suppliers that Nokia purchases from, under chip fabs, a lot of OEMs and ODMs like Foxconn are going to be listed there as suppliers for Nokia. And then also on the chip design front, we obviously talked about the new dependency with Nvidia / co R&D relationship with Nvidia. Qualcomm, also a very large supplier to Nokia, also licenses out a lot of IP to companies like Nokia and Ericsson and others as well. So a little explanation on there, and then over on the customers, some explanation on customer dynamics. So like we mentioned earlier with Nokia, some of the headwinds they're facing with their sales to China as of late. China's three big telecom network providers encouraged to favor more equipment purchases from Chinese companies versus companies like Nokia and Ericsson. So a little more detail there on these company-specific supply chains.
You just got a little sneak peek into our new semi-insider research platform and the company analysis feature. You can get access to our new research platform only with a subscription via our website, chipstockinvestor.com. We are super excited for you to try it. chipstockinvestor.com.
But interesting thing about this deal is, of course, Nvidia, most of its sales these days go to data center, AI data centers, more broadly accelerated computing. That is beginning to spread into cloud and enterprise. So basically everything that is not housed within data center that is accessed publicly via the internet. And that would include telecom infrastructure, which we believe is still mostly in the beginning stages of a new growth cycle. And so NVIDIA is punching its ticket so it can ride this wave of growth as well.
Doing a little future proofing.
Indeed, a little future proofing.
RAN, radio access network.
This is new stuff for NVIDIA. They've been developing a lot of this hardware now for a number of years, and it's available, but not widely used yet. So a lot of accelerated hardware used in the actual, as you said, the RAN, radio access network, and then some of the computers that power those things, as well as just more general software-defined networking, CUDA libraries powering all of this. So NVIDIA has this stuff, but like, how do they actually land the sale when a company is developing network equipment. One way you can do it is you invest in the company.
That'll do it. Press release from just yesterday. Nvidia is going to invest 1 billion in Nokia to accelerate this AI RAN, radio access network. And that's going to be important as there's this transition from 5G, which we're currently on, to 6G, which is targeted for initial rollout in 2030.
Yeah, I remember a decade ago, we started writing publicly anyways about investments. 5G was like the hot thing. We were all getting ready for the initial rollout of 5G within a few years. That began to happen in the late 2010s. And man, here we are already talking about 6G. What is the difference between 5G and 6G? We've only had 5G for less than a decade. A couple of key differences here. So data transfer rates for 5G are measured in gigabits per second, usually up to 20 gigabits per second maximum data transfer speed. 6G is going to be like up to 100 times faster once the standards are researched and defined. So up to hundreds of gigabits per second, or maybe even up to 1 terabit per second data transfer speed is like the upper end estimate for what might be possible. Latency is going to go from around 1 millisecond or maybe a few milliseconds, depending on the 5G network performance. 6G is looking to do less than a millisecond, so microseconds. Basically, for all intents and purposes, zero latency. And then 5G supports up to 1 million endpoints per 1 square kilometer. 6G is going to increase that capacity. And the big push for this is not so that we can stream YouTube videos faster on our smartphone while we're driving down the freeway.
It's not. While you were saying all of this, I was like, this is going to be perfect for driving down the highway in those middle US states.
To be fair, like we don't really use 5G for that either. A lot of the applications for 5G are commercial and industrial, kind of working quietly. A lot of companies deployed 5G small cells for their own internal use. 6G is going to be like that as well, with a lot of AI applications, things like real-time digital twins, like maybe operating in a factory. If a company is trying to get real-time data and update the digital twin version of that factory, maybe 6G would have an application there. Other types of real-time 3D video-based communications, robotics, and support of massive transfer of data for things like robotics. So it's more kind of moving this direction. It's not going to be necessarily for consumer use. You probably don't need 1 terabit per second, more than likely streamed to your smartphone.
We use this a lot when we're talking about EUV and DUV, but let's break it down a little bit more for the radio frequency.
Go in the opposite direction. Not this way. We're not headed towards ultraviolet and X-ray and gamma rays. We're headed beyond infrared.
From purple to red.
Yeah, and beyond. Okay, so let's maybe talk about a few definitions here. So when we're talking about 5G, like what makes 5G possible is it took radio waves, which are a very long wavelength, very low frequency, and very low energy, and it started moving that wavelength back towards the infrared and the red spectrum. So shorter wavelengths, shorter frequencies, and higher energy. And as a result, it could encode and transfer more data. One of the problems, of course, with 5G, and what was problematic for some companies like Verizon, for example, which used to be the US's largest telecom network, was they went all in on millimeter wave, which is measured in gigahertz. And that didn't work out so well because of that shorter wavelength. Sometimes like the signal would do something silly like just bounce off of windows. The tech wasn't quite ready for it yet. And that opened the door for T-Mobile in the US, which went longer wavelengths, lower frequency to pick up a lot of business. And then of course the Sprint merger and whatnot. It worked. Those little 5G small cells worked if there was like a very clear line of sight and you didn't get too far distance from the small cell. So a lot of the application, again, was for industrial and commercial use. This is why 6G is probably going to be similar, because the standards being developed now are going to continue to move towards red and infrared spectrum. It's going to be even shorter, potentially into the terahertz, which is basically like a microwave. And this is probably not going to make its way into normal consumer applications. The wavelength is just too short. The frequency is too high. It's just not going to work for like your smartphone, more than likely. Sorry for the science lesson. Long story short is 6G is still in research and development phase, which is why Nvidia would want to make an investment in one of the companies researching 6G standards, Nokia.
So here's a look at Nokia's annual revenue, net income, free cash flow. Looks like revenue's been on the downhill for a while.
Not great, but they did get that little bump during some of the initial rollouts of 5G in the late 2010s. And then again, a few years ago, 2021, 22, there was a little bit of growth, but yeah, you're right. It's been on the downhill. Profitability lumpy, which you would expect from a cyclical business.
Next, we have Nokia's balance sheet. So don't have a ton of debt. They've actually been paying down debt pretty significantly. Their cash and short-term equivalents down to about 5.7 billion in the last 12 months. So this added investment from Nvidia is certainly going to help their balance sheet.
Yeah, definitely help with the R&D efforts. And let's look at one more. I think there is, in general, some general excitement that maybe 6G is getting close. Companies like Nokia may be making these investments. Maybe there's going to be some payoff at some point. So even before the announcement yesterday, you can see the valuation was ticking higher. But also that has to do with the fact that sales and profit have been on a downtrend as well as of late. But perhaps some market expectation that there is going to be another wave of 5G infrastructure build out as enterprise computing markets, including telecommunications, goes through a new cycle of growth, perhaps starting right now this year, but perhaps heating up into 2026. So why would Nvidia want to invest right now? We've talked about this a number of times. The three reasons Nvidia makes an equity investment: they're certainly not betting early on a startup here with Nokia, and an acquisition of Nokia is probably not likely either. So why would Nvidia make an investment in a company like Nokia that has been dealing with declining sales and declining profit?
I think this one would fall into number 3, control over the supply chain.
For sure. As you said, future proofing. This basically guarantees that Nokia, as they develop 6G technology and then eventually equipment, telecom equipment that operates a 6G network, Nvidia is probably going to have a place in that infrastructure and probably going to land some sales with Nokia. From that slide earlier, where we showed you some of the AI, RAN, radio access and network equipment that they have been developing. And is, of course, CUDA software libraries and other software support services on top of that.